I am so excited today to have Chrissy Livergood on the Arthritis Life podcast. Wait, did I pronounce your last name right?
Yes,
Okay, good. Now I
it's
forgot.
just like it looks.
Okay, perfect, perfect. This is funny. I've known you a while, but for some reason I never had to say
Right.
your last name out loud. So welcome, and can you share with the audience where do you live and what is your relationship to arthritis?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk today. So that's like kind of a loaded question. I'm
Yeah.
talking to you from Central New York. I spend some of my time here in Syracuse, and then I also spend part of my year uh in Los Angeles and Yosemite National Park. So I
Yes.
drive a lot. And this is just for like family, work, etc. Um,
Hmm.
and my connection to arthritis is I have rheumatoid arthritis, seronegative. I was diagnosed in February of 2021, but I suspect I have memories of symptoms like literally as long as I can remember. So
Wow.
and I think we'll get into this a little later, the
Hmm.
diagnosis journey, but I think it's probably going to be familiar to lots of people.
Yeah.
Years and
Yeah.
years of finding a diagnosis.
Absolutely. It is really hard to even pinpoint, yeah, when did you, if you've lived with pain for a long time, like then when did it become this like clinical, diagnosis? And actually, yeah, let's go straight into that. What is your diagnosis, journey slash saga, as it often
Yeah.
is? Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely a saga. So I guess, kind of going back as long as I can remember, I was like the kid who couldn't run the mile in grade school. There was just like always something wrong with my knees. I remember I went to my pediatrician, as a grade schooler, and they said it was patellofemoral syndrome. That was kind of the word of the day, and that was it. It was kind of like, well, that's what it is. Can't do anything about it. And that's just what it was. I um was always pretty active and ended up being a pretty serious swimmer because it was like the thing that didn't bother my joints. And after I graduated high school, tried to do a little bit of more like athletic stuff in college, but really like post undergrad, tried to uh, be a little more active and participate in sports that weren't just swimming. And I was always hurt, always, always, always hurt. Um, I saw like literally dozens of orthopedic doctors because that's who I thought you went to if your joints hurt. And I had problems with my knees, my ankles, my shoulders, my elbows, like kind of all of your major joints. And it was always like, we'll do some x-rays, maybe we'll do an MRI, maybe we'll do a cortisone shot. But um, the familiar, like, sorry, my diagnostic doesn't show anything. I can't really do anything for you. And I was getting so fed up because I'm like, I know something's wrong. I know something is wrong with my body. But no one can tell me what. And I was like, well, the doctor has the diagnostic and if nothing's showing up on there, like, what are they supposed to do? So I really felt at a dead end and went through that process of like, is it in my head? But like, it's not because I can see the swelling. I can see that I
Wow.
can't bend my knee. Like I'm having very clear physical signs, but no one knows what to do. And then I like date burned in my brain. I had a pretty bad flare the summer of 2020. I went on like a really, really like low key walk outside and my knees just like exploded. And then it kind of subsided after a couple of weeks. And I thought, well, this is just how my body is, I guess. February 19th, 2021, I went for a walk at the beach, like nothing out of the ordinary, nothing extreme. And my left knee swelled up a ton. And later that day, I like hopped on we had a Peloton, like it just hopped on the bike to like move around a little more. This was still like pretty COVID-y, so we couldn't like do a lot. And I was pretty bored. So like hopped on the bike and my knee just got worse and worse and worse to the point where it was like twice the size of my other leg. I like couldn't move around the house at all. And I was just furious. Like, I cannot go to another doctor. I cannot have someone tell me again, like even more than the pain was like, I can't emotionally go through being told again that nothing's wrong. And my sister-in-law asked if I had ever gone to a rheumatologist. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. So no.
Yeah, yeah.
And because this was just like there's no like family history or anything. I didn't know anybody who had like an inflammatory arthritis condition. So rheumatologist was not my vocabulary. And I was so angry. Like I was so frustrated with everyone telling me like, oh, just go see a doctor. Cause I'm like, it's not just go see a doctor. It's go see a doctor and then be crushed. Um, and I was so furious. And I was like, fine. And I like Googled the closest rheumatologist to my house and
Um,
called them. And I was so angry already. And I remember the receptionist being like, do you know you're calling a rheumatologist? Because I didn't have the words. I didn't know how to vocalize like I'm having this problem. Someone suggested I see this type of doctor who turned out to be a really lovely person. But
mm-hmm.
it was just like I was already so activated that question like I mean I was just like give me an appointment. So made the appointment because it was still pretty COVID-y and you're talking about like immunocompromised
Yeah.
patients. There was a couple telehealth appointments and I went to get blood work and then had an in-person appointment to discuss the blood work. And I had like probably one of the biggest meltdowns of my life when my doctor was like, I know what's wrong and I know how to treat it and we're going to take care of you. And I was just hysterical, completely hysterical. He handed me a tissue in the office.
Yeah.
Um, and that was that.
Were you
So
crying with like relief
yeah,
or yeah.
yeah. It was like finally there is some confirmation and validation that it's not in my head. I'm so relieved I don't have to go through this process again of another dead end. And it's like, okay, we finally have something to work with. And yeah, it's just a relief of like, I'm not I'm not super big on like diagnosis labels, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. Like, I kind of don't care what it is. I care that we have a plan to deal with the symptoms and the
Right.
underlying conditions. So I was kind of like, I don't care. Just
No.
like help me.
You're no, and we've talked about that. Well, the foreshadow. Well, we've talked about that in this in the support group before. But yeah, I love that distinction. There is a big difference between there is, for me at least, there's a validation of having a label for something when you've been told by so many doctors that it's nothing, that you just need to tough it out and just exercise more or whatever you
It
were
was
told.
it was rest
Oh,
actually. And
rest. Okay.
I was like, how can I rest from rest? Like I'm already so hurt I can't do anything. Like rest doesn't exist in my environment anymore. That's
Yeah,
all I'm
or
doing.
you're already resting, so that's
Yeah,
obviously not
yeah.
healing
Not helpful.
anything. And then there's the relief of a treatment plan because they are two separate things. Like, I mean, just a quick example from my life of something that's one and not the other would be when I got diagnosed with gastroparesis, which was like extremely validating. This was in 2003 that I wasn't, I've been told, was told that I was just faking an eating disorder and stuff like that. And I was like, no, something's wrong with my stomach. Like, I'm trying to eat. I want to have a giant ice cream
Mhm.
cone, but my stomach is like not digesting. They're
Yeah.
like, you just think it is not digesting.
Mm.
But then they did a gastric
Yeah.
emptying scan. They're like, oh, your stomach, by the way, your stomach is not digesting. I'm like, yeah, that's what it felt
I know,
like.
thanks.
But they were like, there aren't that many treatments at that time. I know it's changed now. And whereas the RA, also diagnosed in 2003, was like, we know what it is, and there's treatments that work. So you have like
Yeah.
two buckets filled of hope,
Hmm.
and the most important one, like you said, long term, the most important one is having a treatment plan or having
Yeah.
the hope that something will reduce your symptoms. And I'm just take a I want to take a quick moment to say, I'm so sorry that with all that, you had actually, it wasn't just invisible symptoms like pain, you had swelling in multiple joints.
Yeah.
Like, that's like huge flag for any medical provider to say,
Yeah.
it's not an injury, it's if it's multiple joint swelling, right?
And it's really strange because I saw so many doctors and had so like it was always multiple joints. And I'm really surprised. And I mean, I saw doctors in New York, California, Atlanta, like no one ever caught that. No one ever suggested maybe there was something going on. So it kind of strange in that
Mhm.
way. And
Yeah.
I'm like pretty textbook. I didn't know anything about RA, but my doctor's like, are you stiff in the morning? I was like, as a matter of fact, I am. Like
Yeah.
I'm not like a special case. So I am a
Right.
little bit surprised that so many people didn't make further suggestions, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really a shame. And, I mean it also reminds me of just the randomness of life and that what if your sister-in-law hadn't suggested a
Yeah.
rheumatologist? Like how much longer would you have had to suffer? I mean, at that point when it's so clearly inflammatory arthritis, like for those listening who might not know a lot about this stuff, inflammatory arthritis is like a synonymous with like autoimmune kinds of arthritis, like
Mhm.
rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis. And the longer you wait for treatment, the more likely you are to have irreversible joint damage. At this point in 2025, joint damage is considered irreversible. So, it's really a matter of it's a very urgent matter, yet it's being missed in a lot of people. So, if you're listening to this and you have
Mhm.
bilateral joint pain, meaning both sides of the body, especially the little joints of your fingers and toes or like the distal joints, and especially worse in the morning with a pattern of getting better with activity and or visible swelling in multiple joints. Those are all especially if you're Caucasian, it's often looks pink or red. Depending on your skin tone, you can feel sometimes you can actually feel heat on your joints, especially like the knuckles. Those are all big, like you said, textbook things. So, I'm sorry you had such a delay in your diagnosis, but once you got the diagnosis, what have been some of the highlights and lowlights of your treatment journey? They said it would
So
just be simple. Was it simple? Because sometimes it is, other times it's not.
I think that I have had a pretty simple path. Just from hearing so many other people's stories. I immediately put on methotrexate. Um, I had done a couple rounds of like meloxicam, diclofenac, like those kinds of anti-inflammatory things. But once we had like some blood work to show, okay, mine was being HLA-B27 positive in addition to all these other like symptoms and things like that. And then very, the high CRP, ESR, kind of all of your classic blood markers. So putting all that together, then immediately went on methotrexate and failed that. And my doctor recommended I start an infusion. And I have a history, I have a pretty strong vasovagal response to needles, which is basically like, I have no fear of needles at all. Like, stick me all day long, but my body has like a physiological reaction where I just like pass out. And I have since learned this is like one of my best tips. Uh, if I can recline, even if it isn't fully laying down, even just like slumping in a chair, vasovagals, I guess your like your blood pressure drops.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would like faint. If I can recline a little bit, it keeps like the blood moving and you don't
Nice.
have that
Yeah.
blood pressure drop. But I didn't know that yet. So my doctor's telling me, we should start this infusion. And I put it off for a while, several months, like probably it was probably 3 to 6 months. And finally I was like, I just got to bite the bullet because like clearly my symptoms are still here. And I also was like, I was a little hesitant to go straight to infusions because I heard so many people, I'm like still what I would consider newly diagnosed, like a year in, and so many people do injectables. or you like fail that and then go to infusion. I always had the impression that infusions were like a little more extreme or a little more like you've tried all these other things, like last resort kind of thing. I don't think that's actually true.
No,
That's just
it's
the impression that I
yeah.
had.
And you're not
Uh,
alone. I will just take a quick, brief
mhm,
educational moment because I didn't realize this was such a prevalent assumption people made. It does, on some kind of gut level, it feels like taking a medication is like an oral medication is like the less extreme. An injection is the next bump up, and infusion is the next. But it's in rheumatology, that is not the case at
mhm,
all. I'm on Xeljanz right now, which is an oral tablet. It's way more down the line of treatments, meaning it's one that you have to have failed many other things to go on, and it has more risk factors for side effects than an infusion, for example, of like Remicade. Like Remicade, which is infusion, Humira, which is an injection, and Enbrel, which is an injection, are all three very similar, TNF inhibitor medications with similar side effect profiles. Doesn't matter that one of them is an infusion that takes like 4 hours versus
mhm,
injection. So just if anyone listening, and you also can take there's multiple medications that you can take via either infusion or injection or via oral or injection, like methotrexate being the
mhm,
best example of you can take oral tablets or an injection. So long story short, the method of getting the medication in your system does not necessarily reflect the severity of the
mhm.
potential impact on your immune system and such. But it's a very common assumption people make. I probably made too, before I
Yeah.
experienced all this stuff.
Yeah. So a couple things on that. I do a Symphony Aria
Oh,
infusion. I
nice.
guess
Yeah.
there's a Symphony injectable.
Mhm.
And I don't know this for sure, but like I'm definitely on the heavier end. And I know like when you do an IV infusion, you can like adjust it's
Yeah.
weight based. And so
Mhm.
I do wonder if that figured into going to the infusion just because I could like be treated a little more precisely.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's the
the other
case.
thing, and I'm sorry, I can't remember if this is on your podcast or something, somewhere else I heard
No, it's
it,
okay.
but I think this is actually one thing that helped me move on with the infusion. I heard someone say like when you take a pill, like we take pills for all kinds of things. That's just kind of like normal life. When you have to go sit in a chair and get an IV put in and everything, like that is really like you're sick. And coming
Yeah.
to terms with that is really difficult. Like you're really facing like, okay, there's something major going on here. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and even with the injectable, like I mean, I at least got a lot of vaccines growing up and things like that. So
Mhm.
like even having a shot is a little bit different. I had, I think, two IVs in my lifetime before starting the infusions. So that was a big sort of like, I don't think I had processed that, but hearing that really helped me like, okay, this is like a scary thing and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something to face now. And
Yeah.
I will say I am my infusion experience has been very good. We started talking about like I'm all over the place. I'm in the car all the time. I'm traveling all the time, which
Mhm.
makes just getting my regular like prescriptions difficult. I
Yeah.
think that trying to get specialty medication that needs to be refrigerated in different places on different timelines for me would be kind of a nightmare.
Yes.
I know at least one doctor was like, oh, you're young, you're what she called a walkie-talkie. We prefer to put you on injectables. And I was like, that just doesn't fit with my like it is so nice. Every 8 weeks, I go see my rheumatologist, I walk down the hall, I sit down in a chair, and the greatest infusion nurse on earth who is just an absolute wizard places my IV that I don't even feel half the time.
Me
And I
neither.
sit
Yeah.
there. Symphony Aria is a very quick infusion. I'm usually like 45 minutes, I'm done.
Oh, oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. So, and that's like, chair to door.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a quick one. So like I just go take my iPad or watch whatever is on TV, and I just sit there and I chill, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to like psych myself up to self-inject. I don't have to worry about the injectables. So like everybody obviously has a lot of variables that go into what they and their doctor choose for
Mhm, mhm.
their treatment. But I have had a very good experience with the infusions. It just took me a while to sort of like accept that that's what I was going to do.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you're bringing this up. I don't think anyone on this podcast has talked about it in this level of detail yet about the kind of mentality around the different kinds of mechanisms of delivery for the medications. But I think it's really important. And I also found, somebody who traveled a lot when I was living in California for grad school. I was flying back and forth between Seattle and California a lot to do like family stuff and I was on Remicade every 6 weeks at the time, and I found the infusion was so much easier than the refrigeration part of the injection was always a hard part, and also the you're right having to when you have an injectable medication you have or any other medication other than infusion based you need to deal with the specialty pharmacies directly yourself. Whereas at least in both Seattle where I've received infusions and California in those medical centers, you get like admitted, quote unquote, to the facility. At least that's how they deal with it. Like a hospital, like name tag in both of the hospital. This is where they gave me the infusions or medical clinics, and they wouldn't. They deal with all the ordering and the medications physically once you get there, and that's what. And so it's just different than having to talk on the phone to like yourself,
Yeah.
and they do
Mine
this
is
all the time. Yeah,
mine is in my rheumatologist's
that's really
office.
nice.
Like he runs a infusion center.
That's amazing.
Um, so I like literally walk 10 feet and they've it's all there. So
It can
it's very
vary.
convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Like in,
Like I don't have to go to a hospital. I don't have to do the, admissions
yeah.
piece. Like I do have a very good setup. I love my rheumatologist, and I can't believe sometimes I'm like I went through decades of all of this garbage to call the first guy on the list. And like the universe is like, okay, we'll give you a good one because
Yeah.
you went through all this.
No, that is so funny. I feel the same. Like everyone's like, how did you find like your rheumatologist? She sounds amazing. She's like a magical unicorn. Like, you must have had to like go through so many to find her. I was like, nope, she's the one
Yeah.
that my primary care was like, see
Mm,
someone at this clinic. And I was like,
nice.
probably my mom called and was like, because it was 2003 and I was I like totally at that point so wasted away and really sick that she probably was the one that called and they were just like, who has the first available appointment?
Mm,
Drop fate into my lap, this amazing doctor. And so yeah, I think that was your karma though. Let's just choose to
yeah.
believe that was
Yeah.
your karma.
Yeah.
And I also really love that you have talked like you meant you one thing we have touched on a podcast about before is like their denial, emotionally denial that you're really a sick person or you have a sickness or an illness is your brain's attempt to protect yourself, right? So it's a short-term adaptive response that is not helpful long term. And so you're right that when you have this invisible condition, it's not like you have a huge cast on your arm or something that like reminds you constantly. Then when you have to do something physical, like give yourself an injection or go and get an infusion, which on an emotional gut level feels more like you're a sick person than an injection, it's hard. You have to actually confront, yeah, this is happening. Like almost like a watch what you wish for, you might get it. Like all I want is a
Mm,
diagnosis and someone to tell me that there's a treatment plan. And then you're like, wait, this treatment plan means I'm really sick.
yeah. Yeah.
Like how did you cope with it or come to terms with all of those like swirling emotions?
I mean, I think some of it realistically was just like, to use the sort of cliche term of like sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm just like, I'm so fed up with this. Like, fine, give me whatever. Like, let's do this because I need to move on. I need to see improvement. Um, I do think like I am a pretty big believer in just like mindset in general and some like, okay, it's gonna be fine. Like, this is what your doctor said to do. you trust this person. We had a relationship at that point. Like, this is what he's telling you to do. Like, this is what you got to do. Um, I can't do anything about having RA. Like, it just is. And so the sooner I can try to accept that on whatever level I can at that moment is like what I got to do to like get on with life, because just sort of like giving up and wasn't an option. And so I think it was like kind of forced and kind of a choice of like, this is your life. This is what we're doing. So let's go do it. And the first one was terrifying. I mean, even methotrexate, I cannot tell you. I remember sitting on the side of my bed, terrified. Like, I was so scared to take these pills and sat there for, I don't know, probably a good 30 to 60 minutes. I was at the time, like, I was up in Yosemite, my husband was down in LA, and I'm texting him like, "Oh, I'm gonna die," like pretty dramatic. And now, like, I took my methotrexate last night. Like, I don't even think about it. Just pop the pills. But the first time is super scary. And so, like, I think having the experience with the methotrexate of like, and I definitely had side effects and things, but like, it's okay. So like, okay, I did this once, I can do this again. It's a little bit of a different situation, but I think like getting through that first one, being like, it's okay. Like, you did it. It's, I think sometimes the anxiety and the anticipation and all that is so much worse than just going to do it. And so like getting over that initial thing was like, okay, I can do this. Great. We did it once, we can do it again. I wasn't so bad. I do have this like incredible nurse who I will say, like, again, I just got lucky. This person is incredibly good at what she does. And so that really makes the experience easier too. But it's like you have to confront it and you have to go through it. And that's just my philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very practical mindset. And when you were talking about the anxiety prior to the injection or the infusion and the oral tablets, it reminded me of like the difference between fear and anxiety, right? Anxiety is something bad could happen, something like it's very vague and non-specific sense of dread versus fear is about something specific. So I'm afraid that methotrexate will make me nauseous. I'm afraid that blah, blah, blah. And so in a way, like, the only way to get out of anxiety and into the fear state is to actually do the thing that you're scared of. Like, because I'm like, okay, well, something bad can happen when I take these medications. Well, then once you take them, then you're going to know what the bad thing potentially is, or you can know what the good thing is. So
yeah, and that's like, we always do that. Well, I don't like to speak in absolutes, but we frequently do this of like, you see the scary side effects and you're like, oh, well, that's the thing I'm focused on, instead of like all these people who have a great experience with methotrexate and are very successful on it. And that, a medical professional has said that the benefits outweigh the risk, but we just get so tunnel vision on all this stuff. And I will also say, before I took my first methotrexate dose, I listened to, I think there were like 7 people on, it's a really old episode of the podcast, but like what it's like to take methotrexate. And that was really helpful of like hearing people who, kind of across the board who, took it or stopped taking it, or, things are good, things are bad. Like all of the experiences kind of wrapped up into that one episode was really helpful.
No, I'm so glad. I'm going to put a link to that episode. And I did a couple follow-ups too. Like, what's it like to take methotrexate for rheumatoid arthritis and similar conditions? And then the follow-up was like, what's it like to still be taking methotrexate? Because when we did like a year follow-up, you could see that there are changes, right? Sometimes you titrate up or down. But, honestly, like, yeah, I joke sometimes I'm like an accidental methotrexate influencer, which was not at all my intention when I first did like videos. I also have done videos of myself giving myself my injection. And it's great because, social media or, YouTube, stuff like that, it'll tell you what people are interested, like people will tell you what they like and what they're interested in. I'm sitting here thinking I'm giving you this video of me injecting my methotrexate to like just show you what it's like, thinking that people might just want to see a real patient doing it,
Mhm.
not realizing that the manner in which I was doing it so casually, because it's such not a big deal to me anymore after 20 years of injecting, they were like, wait, you seem kind of like neutral to like happy about doing this. Like, aren't you scared? Aren't you feeling horrible because of all the side effects? I'm like, no, like those are not guarantees. Side effects are
Yeah.
potential. And it's really sad to me how it's just unfortunately the intention of informed consent is obviously extremely noble. We should all be informed of the potential risks of any choices, but it's become so, in my opinion, the fact that you are presenting and communicating to patients almost like exclusively all the worst things that could happen while not counterbalancing that with giving them a sense of what's the most likely, because I have to tell you every possible side effect that could maybe happen. Say, look, the
Mhm.
majority of the times people feel they don't feel so crappy that they stop the medication. X% of people do. X% of people, we don't know why, really feel nauseous or really feel fatigued and they have to stop the medication. And that's that context. X number of people have avoided permanent joint damage and deformity due to this
Mhm.
disease because of this medication. Like it's that would be my dream world in which you kind of present everything in a way in which it has the context around it versus just a giant laundry list of only the worst things that could happen. So
Yeah, I think
I
this
will.
is like a little bit, this is a tangent, but if at some point I was able to give the medical establishment some feedback, I think there's this sort of like assumption that we take everything on blind faith. And so like, okay, the doctor said do this. Yes, we have to hear about the side effects, but like we're just gonna somehow magically know what you just said. Like, okay,
Yeah.
but all of these people feel better. And there's just like this, I don't have a better term other than like blind faith that we will just like know
Yeah.
and accept that somebody said this. I love data. So I would
Yeah.
love to, have some more like statistics around it. But um I do feel like that's, you go in and someone's like, okay, do this, and they walk out. And there's
Yeah.
no, there's nothing else. And then you get to the pharmacy and they're like, when I first started taking methotrexate, I was also taking another medication that is you're not supposed to take them together.
Mm.
And my doctor was like, they are going to pull you aside at the pharmacy and they're going to tell you you can't do this. I'm telling you to do it. Which
Mm.
made my situation a little scarier. I
That
also
is scary.
that's I'm not uh sure that my situation is unique. Um,
Mm.
given what the medications are. Like I don't really want to talk about it because I
Yeah.
don't want to give
Yeah.
anybody ideas.
No, that's
But
okay.
but I really appreciated that because they did at the pharmacy. They were like, you can't do this. And so, we're kind of just like left with the doctor walking out the door and then the scary stuff and the medications and like no communication about like, this is why you're taking it. This is what could happen. Like,
Yeah.
there's never
Yeah.
even discussion about what is a DMARD? What is an
Yeah.
anti-TNF? Like we're totally left to self-educate. And I think just like 30 seconds of like, I'm prescribing this because it can do that would be like really helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think it
No,
would be helpful
you're
to
like,
me.
well, you're perfectly segueing into why I developed my own educational program. Exactly that. Because it's not happening for whatever reasons in the doctor's office. And also, it's even when it is happening, when the doctor takes that time to explain to you the medications, that's one sliver, and it's not sliver, that's an important foundation of your treatment. But when it comes to self-managing your condition on a daily basis, there's so many other things you could be doing. I mean, I'm the first person to be like, medication is a cornerstone of the treatment. And
Mhm.
you can
Yeah.
do other
Yeah.
things like exercise, we can do pain management tools at home, and there's very little guidance ever given on joint protection, all these things that I learned about in occupational therapy school. So long story short, that's why I made, and there's also the emotional part, giving people
Mhm.
access to support and tools to cope with that. So, but I did, when I first started the Room to Thrive course as like an educational program, I actually didn't have information about the medications because I thought, well, this is the low-hanging fruit that of course is being,
Mm.
because it had been talked
Uh,
about for me. Yeah. Or they can Google it, but it's like, no, but even if you Google it, you get a bunch of misinformation. So people also need some like curation of that
yeah.
information. But yeah, even it just, yeah, even someone like you who's like, so, like you're very driven. You said, you're good at doing your research. You're very equipped
Mhm.
at it. You're still feeling left in the lurch. I mean,
Mhm.
what about people who don't have any sort of education or training and don't understand how to make sense of any of this? A lot
Yeah.
of times they just, yeah.
And I do have a great doctor, and I can ask a lot of questions and be like, what does this do? And he'll, at one time, we were like, I was sitting in the chair in the exam room, and then there's like the exam table, and he was like drawing diagrams on the, like
Yeah,
paper protection thing and stuff. Like, I have a great doctor who will do that. And I'm still like, what?
yeah,
There is so much. And like, I don't really blame the doctors. Like, they don't have to, they have so much other stuff they have to deal with in the
exactly.
system that like, fine, I get it. But I think the patients are just like really out here, like holding on to the life preserver in the middle of the ocean kind of
Yes.
thing.
Oh my God. 100%. And when you get diagnosed with, this is one of my other talking soapbox points is that you get diagnosed with or when I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes, which is an autoimmune, thing, like type 1 diabetes, um, it it was like, oh, here's your certified diabetes educator. Like you're gonna have an appointment with her once a week. And like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like
Mm,
she's gonna walk you through how are you gonna self-manage this? How are you gonna
mm,
alter your diet? I mean, I always say for balance, the fact is that if you don't manage diabetes or gestational diabetes correctly, you're literally life-threatening. So I mean,
mm.
the stakes are higher, I think, in terms of life or death, but I would also argue long term, rheumatoid arthritis, if
Yeah,
uncontrolled, is takes 7 years off of your life on average,
yeah.
if uncontrolled. So it is life threatening in the
Yeah.
long run and
I was gonna
quality of
say
life
these are
threatening.
like
Yeah.
these are things that again, I just don't think that patients are really educated on, like the cardiovascular risks, the
Mhm.
diabetes risk, like all of this is heightened with an inflammatory arthritis diagnosis. And like again, I have a great doctor who like he'll look at my lipids. Like my glucose is measured every time I have an appointment, every 8 weeks. Like
Mm,
he's watching all these things.
good,
I'm
good.
really sure that all rheumatologists are looking at anything other than your joints. So, and again, I've had one doctor ever, so I don't want to speak
Yeah.
like out of turn, but my impression from talking to other people is that not everyone is so thorough. And I'm like, cardiovascular disease is already like such a problem. And then we're already like have these additional things lumped on top and like just don't even talk about them. Like that's a
Yeah.
major thing. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
my
will put
knee hurts, but like my heart is important too.
and
So,
that's no, that cardiovascular comorbidity is why the theory is when rheumatoid arthritis is uncontrolled, that inflammation doesn't just stay in the joints, it goes throughout the whole body and affects the heart and lungs. And so we're more likely to have stroke or heart attack. And so that I will put links in the show notes just to back that up, that we're not just like blowing smoke. We're talking about actual, data
yeah,
and
not
make
trying
sure
to
that,
fear monger, but like
yeah,
there's
no,
just so much that we're like nobody talks about at
mhm.
all. It's in in my experience at the doctor's office.
Even with an amazing doctor. And even if,
Right.
and yeah, how did you find my program, by the way? Sorry, probably asked you this earlier, but now
I
I'm on
think that so I for better or worse, I'm a pretty heavy social media user.
You're
And
talking to somebody
right,
who
I
also
know.
is.
So I think once I had a diagnosis, I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I said earlier, I don't care what it's called, but there's value in having a name. And so all of a sudden I was like, okay, again, now I have something to work with. And because I didn't know a single other person, I do now, but I didn't know anybody who had anything like that. Like I was all alone and I was like, well, I guess it's time to fire up the old Instagram, you know. And I think it was probably just from like searching hashtags or something, but immediately found the podcast. And then
Mm.
I think just from like being in the Cheryl universe, heard about the course, um, and was like, okay, this is again, I took the course like maybe 2 or 3 years into my diagnosis. Like I wouldn't say I was newly diagnosed,
Mm-hmm.
like super fresh at that point, but like 2 years, I still don't know anything. And I was like, okay, this is definitely something that I need to do that I think I just saw on social media. And really like a lot of the topics uh are things again, like you said, like the whole point is that it's stuff we don't learn. So I was like, I
Right.
don't know anything about like there, I guess there was a lot of terminology that I hadn't run
Yeah.
into,
Yeah.
which became even more important in the course. Like one of the biggest things that I learned in the course was the term dynamic disability. Like
Mm.
that is another thing of like talking about having a name for something. Like
Yeah.
that, for some reason, that term just like really struck a chord with me about like, I don't know what's going to happen when I wake up in the morning. Like some days I'm great, I'm normal, I'm fine. There are some days I wake up and I'm like, wipe it off the calendar. Like I can't get out of bed today. And you have no way of predicting this. Like there's no pattern for me. Um, and so that dynamic word was like so important for me to hear from other people who are experiencing it to learn like, okay, there's, a word we can put to like, I just don't feel good sometimes. um, like learning about so many of the like tools for putting together your care team, like what
Mm.
the options are. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning. Like I saw all these orthopedic doctors, but I didn't know a rheumatologist was who I needed. Like going through like, here are all
Right.
the people that could help you. Like
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of some of the people on that list, years into diagnosis. Um,
Yeah. Me either.
like,
That's why I put it
yeah,
all together. Yeah, like
yeah,
physiatrist, physical medicine rehab
yeah.
doctor, different than a podiatrist. That's different
Hmm.
than a social worker, a counselor, psychiatrist. There's so many
Hmm.
nutritionists, different people that can help you with exercise, whether that's
Yeah,
occupational therapists, physical
yeah,
therapists, hand therapists,
yeah.
trainers, so many.
And I think the community aspect was a big one too, because like that's why I went to social media in the first place, was to find other people. And so seeing the course, like, okay, here's like study material that's
Hmm.
like technically sound, but then there's a group of people who I can go talk to who understand what I'm doing. I have a really good support system. My parents are incredibly supportive. My husband is like, I give him an award or something. Uh, but they don't get it. Like, no matter how hard they try, like they will never understand what it's like to be in my body. And so having the educational component, but also being able to go talk to people who actually understand, and I don't have to explain all day and I don't have to give disclaimer. I can just talk about my experience is like very valuable.
Yeah, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. That is exactly why, or what I'm hoping people get out of the experience. It really is, and I think a lot of times people with chronic illness, we on social media have often talk about the people who just don't get it. And I think there's
Mm,
really a lot of different buckets of people who don't get it. There's the low hanging, or the most obvious one is people who are like mean people who are like, you're not sick, you're
yeah,
just,
yeah.
but then there's this giant group of people who desperately want to get it, but who
Hmm.
actually, despite as much as they can try, they can't get it. Like, and the analogy I use, that I don't know how helpful this is to other people, is like, me as a Caucasian woman, I need to, and I will, and I do put the work in to try to empathize and imagine what it's like to be black or brown in this country. And I could talk with people
Hmm.
all day long and think about it and imagine it, but I will never truly understand in that same way with a chronic illness, chronic pain. I mean, on some level, we will never completely understand exactly what it's like to live in your body, but we do have this shared experience of dynamic disability,
Hmm.
of waking up one day with a body that just feels foreign to you, or that experience of
Hmm.
having to go through that learning curve of our condition and our medications, and having that heartbreaking experience of like a medication working and then maybe not working anymore. Or,
Hmm.
there's just so much that only people who are in that group can really understand. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you found it. That's why I'm trying to do a better
Yeah.
job asking people how they found it. Because I'm like, I want to, that's typically
Yeah.
people say Instagram, like, but it's, I do want to give shout out to you and anyone else who's participated in the group, because, not every, it takes a lot of courage a, to share your experience in a group setting with people who you don't initially know, and to take the
Hmm.
time and effort to learn about your condition. So it is a testament to the
Hmm.
group. A group is only as strong as the group members, really, too. So.
Yeah. Well, and just to like give you a little plug of like making it a very inviting environment. Like I think sometimes I have a little bit of a different approach to, I think I give doctors a lot of leeway of like, they're I've talked about this recently, but my take is medicine's kind of, it's like guessing. It's like, what is the most, okay, you were presenting with these symptoms, like what is the most like statistically likely probable outcome here?
Yeah.
Like we're just guessing, right? And I think that we have like through whatever mechanism, media or society or whatever word you want to use for it, we've been sort of, I think, conditioned to be like, you go to the doctor and they're like, here, you're fixed, goodbye. And
Yeah.
it's not that simple. And so, I have some differing opinions, I think, than other people sometimes in these groups, and feel very like empowered to share that. Like I feel like I can still, like, I have a voice even if it doesn't necessarily fit with everybody else. And so I appreciate
Yeah.
that like it is definitely welcome to like everyone's opinions.
Yeah,
So,
it's a very inclusive group. I mean, there's people in there
mhm,
you know, um, who are taking totally different treatment paths, but we're
mhm,
all there to support each other. And, there's really just two main ground rules of respect and confidentiality, and as long as we have a environment of respect, we can have there's a lot of different ways to manage these conditions. And,
mhm,
if you, a lot of times people feel like judged for how they're managing their condition. We try to say, this is a safe space for anyone to share what they're doing and what's going well, what's not going well. So I'm glad
mhm.
you feel.
Yeah, I can confirm that like I even when I have like differing opinions, and I'm sure, like you said, there are so many different ways that people approach their
Hmm.
situation, but like people show up and people share, and I think it's because there is a very like, you know, respectful uh group, and like a level of trust that like it's safe to share your
Exactly.
opinion or what your choice is or what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. And, one of the things I've been thinking, reflecting back a lot on when I created the program, I did like a little episode before, or a few weeks ago, on like the origin story of how I created,
Mhm.
Room to Thrive.
Mm.
And one of the things that I really, I'm still, to be totally frank, working on is finding a balance between being wanting to focus on the positive and the not toxic, but avoid toxic positivity.
Mm.
You put this into words before we started talking, not in regards to my program, but just in terms of your outlook in general. And I was like, that's so resonant with what I'm always thinking about, which is, how do I say, okay, we're going to have an environment where it's safe and open to share the difficult things you're going through, and also to make time and space to focus on what can I still do? It's like one of the core tenets of ACT, acceptance and commitment
Mhm.
therapy, is what can I still do that's valuable or meaningful within the confines of our situation? So no matter how hard life is right now, it's like we're not in a coma. We have
Mhm.
choices and where to
Yeah.
put our time and energy. So, how have you struck that balance of, having maybe a positive mindset or whatever you want to call it, while avoiding toxic
Mhm.
positivity?
So like I mentioned this before, but I do think, in some ways, Like, I want to be careful here because I know like there are people that very legitimately struggle with a plethora of, like mental illness and other things where like you can't always just put on a smile and everything's okay. Um, I have found a way to sort of like, okay, like we are choosing to look for positives. Um, and that has had to be like an explicit choice for me. I am kind of like a worrier by nature. And so it's been like years of being like, okay, what is the positive in this situation? But that is not to say I'm going to be delusional or ignore reality. Um, and I think that like with I think like one of the very first things I ever heard immediately after being diagnosed, I believe was on the podcast, was you kind of have to be careful the spaces you put yourself in because it's really easy, especially on the internet, to just get in like a negativity spiral. You like join the wrong Facebook group and like the world is over. And so that was like one of the very first things I heard post-diagnosis. And I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to focus on the good stuff. And like, this is my opinion, but there will always be bad with this. Like, this is a serious condition. Like, we're taking serious drugs to treat it. Like, there's a lot of doom and gloom that's always going to be there. That's not going to go away. Like, my RA is not going to disappear, at least with what we know now. So like that's going to be there no matter what. What can I do to sort of offset that? And what can I do to like make life go on? Like when all this first happened back in February of 2021, I was like, I'm a really avid hiker. Like I try to be active. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like life's over. Like, I don't want to live. I don't want to do anything because I can't do anything ever again. I just went straight down the very bad place. And that was okay as long as I came out of it. And then it was like, okay, hold on. Like maybe things look different, but I can still do stuff. Like maybe I'm going for a walk instead of a run. Maybe I'm using resistance bands instead of barbells. But like there are ways to adapt. There are ways to still enjoy the things I want to enjoy. Um, there are also really terrible days. And to sort of balance some of those, I've given myself like the 1 day rule where if things are really bad, I'll take the 1 day and like if I can, like stay in bed and cry and be really angry and like do all the like wallowing I want for 1 day. And then the next day, you just try and do something to shift that. And that has been really helpful to like, feel the feelings and like allow those to be there, but trying to focus on what I can do and what, like
Yeah.
there are a lot of good people. There are a lot of things my body can do. There's, I've got a great husband and a great dog and, there are sports to watch and things to cook and like all these things in the world that I can still do. And trying to focus on those things takes some effort, but over time that becomes the default.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think to touch on the
Keep going.
toxic piece of it is just
Yeah.
like, I don't think that's helpful. I think that can be very dismissive of your own or other people's feelings. I think that it
Well,
is a little,
what is toxic positivity in your definition, out of curiosity, just because I
yeah,
don't know if everyone listening has heard that phrase.
to me, it's sort of like ignoring reality.
Hmm.
It's like being, it's, if we're on a continuum of like negative to positive,
Hmm.
it's like only living at this end of the extreme instead of like, there's positivity all along here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
for
it's
sure.
just living here and it's not acknowledging like there will be bad days, period. Like with
Mhm.
my body and the way that my disease is pretty well controlled right now, there will be bad days. Like I'm kind of
Yeah.
having one now. I usually don't have a problem with my hands. Today I got the gloves on. Like I
Mm.
know these things are going to happen. I also know these things will pass. And
Yeah.
so instead
Yeah.
of living down here where I'm like, everything is great, I actually, this is kind of funny. I posted something on my Instagram last night. It was like, one of my goals for this week is to take my medicine that it's like my emergency. I'm having a flare. I'm having a lot of inflammation medicine. I hate taking pills. I was like, nope, this is what I need to do this week to take
Yeah.
care of
Yeah.
myself. I feel like I was living in toxic positivity. I'd be like, no, 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 I can push through. Everything's great.
Everything's
And
gonna be
for
fine. It's about to get
me,
better. Yeah.
yeah, like for me, that is not a healthy place to be. The healthy place for me is to be like, this sucks and I don't want to do it, but I'm taking the pills because I'll feel better. And that to me is a positive place of like, I'm doing something to take care of myself. I'm doing something to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if that
No,
example
it
makes a lot of sense,
completely
but
it
that's a
yeah.
very relevant example of something I'm going through right now.
Yeah, I think toxic positivity often in chronic illness communities or from the outside world applied to chronic illness as well. At least, at least it's not cancer.
Mm, yeah,
At least you still have blah 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 blah. At least you're
yeah,
married. I it's like the sub it can lead into also well, okay, sorry. Actually, I just took it from toxic positivity to the suffering Olympics, which is another
yeah,
unhelpful thing.
yep.
But the toxic positivity is, oh, well, you shouldn't feel bad because other people have it worse. Like, just
Hmm.
remember, so it's just like the one person in the universe that's like being actively tortured right now, I was at the worst. Like, they're
Right.
the only one that gets to feel bad. Everyone else
Right,
should not feel
right,
bad,
right.
right? And I
Well,
often, yeah, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's why I kind of put that disclaimer when I started talking about this is like everyone's brains do work differently. So like you might not be in a place today where you can be like, I'm gonna look at the sunny side, because it is
Yeah,
different for everybody. It is like it's not that cut and dry. It is really complicated.
yeah,
So
yeah. And okay, here's a quote. I read this in high school. I've quoted this before on the podcast. Viktor Frankl, from his book Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Jewish Viennese psychotherapist that was put through the Holocaust and survived. And he wrote this. This is the quote I have been turning over in my head for 25 years, and
mhm.
I'm still trying to think whether I agree with it or not. But I think it's a helpful quote. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And he was explicitly saying this in the context of the concentration camps when he felt that there was still some, albeit small in that case, objectively, freedom. He had
Mhm.
so few freedoms, right? He couldn't choose where to go, what to eat, what's being done to his body, but he could try, in his mind, at least how I interpreted the book, I know it's probably translated not into English, is that he could still choose to what he focused his mind on. I think the caveat that you gave, right? Biochemically, like there are mental health conditions that make you not potentially capable of changing your
Mhm.
attitude. And that's where I think I'm not sure it's 100% applicable to everyone, but I
Right.
find it a helpful quote. Is that
Yeah,
resonant?
oh, for sure. And like I think that's a perfect quote to put here. It's like that's again my attitude with my headspace is that, there are plenty of good things, even when I'm in a bad place. And again, I just want to reiterate, like for me, it is important to have those bad days
Yes,
to
yes, yes. We
get it
allow
out.
those.
Like I am so pro cry. I cry about everything. Like happy, sad, I'm just crying all the time. And so like that is such a I feel like physical relief when I
Mhm.
do that. And so like having those bad days is like a really critical component of the positivity piece for me. But
Yeah.
those bad days are like once a quarter, maybe like
Mhm.
that will
Mhm.
vary for everybody. But yeah, like I really and it did take some work. It like that. I don't think I'm like the optimist by nature. Like it really took a lot of explicit, like, I guess a lot of people might call this a gratitude practice.
Yeah.
Um, I am not, I've never really considered myself like a gratitude person. I don't like journal or anything, but I think that's maybe in the vernacular of something
Yeah.
people do
Yeah.
is like, okay, I'm gonna write down 3 things today or whatever. Mine isn't quite so structured. It's more
Yeah.
about like getting used to saying like, what is the choice I'm making here? What am I choosing to do? I know like to kind of like to take your outline a little bit here, but like one of the choices that I've made that came out of the Room to Thrive course is like like taking action is just that's
Mm.
who I am as a person. Like I need to do stuff. Like sitting alone with my thoughts for too long. It's just like
Yeah.
I can't do it. I need to do something.
Yeah.
Um and
Yeah.
so like one of the things from the Room to Thrive course was like kind of seeing like what you were doing, what other people were doing is like taking action about this
Right.
circumstance that we find ourselves in. And that has been super helpful to me in like keeping the positive attitude too. Like getting involved in seeing how like research is coming up with new treatments, like how the scientific landscape is changing. Like there is hope in a lot of places, like learning about like how exercise can be so beneficial to joints, but also in dealing with fatigue. Like getting involved has helped me manage my disease because I learned so much more, which helps me keep a hopeful outlook.
I love
Um,
that. Yeah. How can you tell us a little bit more about like the specifics? Like which organizations did you start getting involved with? And what does that look like?
so I just defaulted to Arthritis Foundation. Like that was again right after diagnosis. I was just like, internet help me.
It's
And
the
Arthritis Foundation
foundation
is
for
it
arthritis. Makes
is
sense.
yeah, exactly. And so I will say I think I kind of got involved with them mostly from like like, oh my God, I want to do this thing. They have this bike ride every year. There are now 2 bike rides. They're starting the second one this year, but called the California Coast Classic, and it is a bike ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And
Yeah, baby.
I've mentioned many times now, like trying to be a pretty active person, and I was like, I want to do this. Like, this sounds amazing. This sounds like life changing, once in a lifetime kind of things. And I watched it for a couple of years, and I was very intimidated by number one, the distance. It's 525 miles. And there are some, pretty like hefty fundraising minimums because this is a
Mm.
charity bike ride to benefit the Arthritis Foundation. I was
Right,
very
right.
intimidated by both of them. Again, Instagram started, I think actually I made like a Taylor Swift arthritis meme that someone
Oh my
commented
God.
on. And I saw their username and I was like, I gotta go check this person out who was doing the ride for the first time. And so started chatting with them. And I like for years have been following this. And finally she finished the ride this year and she was like, I think you should do this. And I was like, oh, fine. So
Oh my
signed
gosh.
up for
Wait, hold on.
that.
Really quick. Can we just
Yeah.
give ourselves credit for our restraint in going an entire hour
I know.
without talking about Taylor Swift?
Listen, there have been so many. Do you know how many times I wanted to say Delulu? Like it's always here. It's
Delulu is the
always,
Salulu. Yeah.
yeah. Yes. I have
Sorry,
been
sorry.
exercising extreme restraints.
So much. But what they should have like, oh my God, I always have these ideas like too late. Like should have like integrated Taylor Swift like lyric quotes throughout the entire thing. It has like an Easter egg hunt. Anyway, that'll be for the next time. Okay, sorry. So
Yeah, yeah.
you're going on a very linear path.
So
Helpfully.
yeah, I've been sort of like this outsider watching the bike ride
Mhm.
forever, but um that has been one of my like first like, ooh, I really want to get involved with the foundation. But the other thing, again, like pretty early in my diagnosis was like to help me. And the Arthritis Foundation has these connect groups that
Yes.
are sort of like education and support groups. So I started attending those. which are very helpful. Like a
Hmm.
wide variety of topics covered. My group that I was attending and I'm a co-facilitator of is location based, but there are also like disease specific groups. There's chronic pain.
Hmm.
There's all kinds of different groups out there. So I started going to those meetings about, I think about once a month. That was like a great entry point again of like very similar structure to the Room to Thrive program of like, there's usually like a program for the first portion and then just like
Hmm.
some open sharing
Right, right.
for like the second half or 2/3 or whatever.
And
Uh,
it's usually once a month, right?
it really, I think it depends. Like, I think
Oh, okay.
chronic pain meets weekly,
Oh, I
maybe.
didn't know that. Okay, because I know that,
It just depends.
yeah, the Room to Thrive is typically weekly or three times a month,
Mhm.
depending on because sometimes we skip for like holidays and stuff like that. But
Right.
yeah, it's amazing. I am part of the Seattle one. That's once a
Yay.
month, the Seattle one. So yeah, it's great to get, just get connected with your local community. I think is really
Hmm.
nice because then you can, meet people in person if that's even if the group is virtual, you can maybe like meet up in
Hmm.
person at like the Run for Arthritis and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was a participant, it was all virtual. Now that I'm facilitating with some other people, we're trying to kind of get a mix going this year of
Mhm.
virtual and in person.
So nice.
And yeah, there's like Jingle Bell Run, people meet up, walk, um, what is it? Walk
Walk to Cure Arthritis.
here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know people show up like for California Coast Classic, like at the finish line and stuff. Um,
Oh, maybe I'm gonna have to do
so
that. I love going down. I
yeah.
love going to California.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, like I was involved in this group and very sadly the person who ran the West LA group passed away pretty suddenly. And
I,
she was a very like a force in the Arthritis Foundation.
hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of people have felt this kind of like a call to like continue the legacy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's so hard to talk about. But
I'm sorry. Yeah.
that was kind of like, okay, and I didn't even know this person very well. Like I talked on email a little bit or like Instagram or whatever, but I
Yeah.
never met her in person or anything, but like such an impact.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, here's something I can do. Like I've gotten a lot out of this organization. Here's something I can do because again, like do it that action just like really helps me. Like I don't get stuck. I feel like I
Right.
don't
Right.
get
Right.
in the like I'm just gonna lay in the dark and ruminate. Like no, because I have to go do something. And that like
Mhm.
snaps me out of it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um so
There's
yeah, during
also
the yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I didn't want to forget to say there's the Pathways
Yeah.
advocacy kind of conference that's you and we're both going to that I haven't been to before in March in Chicago, March 2025. We're recording this in 2025.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
maybe we'll be going to the future ones and this will be evergreen. But there's also like formal, just to throw in there too, if you're really like into politics or legislative advocacy, there's a lot of opportunities, which I was always very scared of that. I wasn't scared of the needles, I wasn't scared of anything other than small spaces. And I was scared to do formal advocacy in terms of like going to my state or national
Yep.
capital because I'm such a people pleaser. I don't know. I felt something that was just like scary about talking to like a real quote
Hmm.
unquote like politician. They're literally just people. And
Yeah.
if you're really frustrated by like issues with medication access or the cost of prescription drugs, if you've had to been, a victim of like fail first policies, which fail these cheaper drugs before you can go on the expensive ones, there are really great systems in place. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
because this is an issue that comes up year after year because we haven't fixed it yet. But through all of the major nonprofits, Autoimmune Association, Arthritis Foundation, Creaky Joints, our Rheumatology Foundation, or American College of Rheumatology, they send patients. I have been sent to
Mhm.
Washington, D.C. for free. They will fly me there, put me up at a hotel, teach me what the talking points are. The only thing they can't do is they can't be the constituent. They need you as a constituent to go there, talk to your
Mhm.
elected officials, tell them why patient access to medications is important or autoimmune research is important, whatever the issue is. That has been so such an unexpected empowerment thing for me. So sorry, didn't mean to
So
steal.
I'm doing that actually
Okay.
with the Arthritis Foundation, their ambassador program. So
Yes.
I'm the same way. I'm like, I am very intimidated by this. And like I'm very new to this. And we're in like a new congressional cycle. So I'm kind of getting up to speed, but uh, you know, it is kind of just like sharing your story. And
It is so much more simple
um
than you think. Yeah.
yeah, so there's an advocate program and there's an ambassador program. And I think it's just kind of like time commitment based. So I'm also doing that with Arthritis Foundation. Yeah,
Amazing. You
yeah.
jumped in
So
feet first for
yeah,
sure.
it like snowballed aggressively, but
No. And if you all have heard of from Eileen on the podcast before, Eileen Davidson, chronic Eileen, she and I talk about this a lot. Yeah, once you get involved in one organization, and even you, let's say you start off by getting involved in like the fundraiser for the, the Coast Classic, or you get involved in the Live Yes Connect groups, and then it's like they realize, oh, she's somebody who's like interested in being involved, or also they get to know you and they're like, oh, you should also be involved in this. It just snowballs. So
Mhm.
starting somewhere, just looking up, most of these major foundations have, a little tab on their website that's like volunteer opportunities.
Mhm.
I
But
really
it
highly recommend it.
yeah. Yeah, and we talked about like one of the objectives of Room to Thrive is empowerment. And
Yes. Yeah.
like, boy, do I feel empowered being like, I'm doing something about this. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
if I'm going to see results. I don't know, in my lifetime or whatever. But like, I feel, and there is, I think, like a little hopeless component can creep in with things like RA and other like
Mhm.
inflammatory arthritis of like, you can't do anything about it. Like, yeah, I can take my medicine and I can like try and take a walk around the block or whatever. You're like, ultimately, I cannot change it. So this gives me a little bit of a sense of control that
Yeah.
I can do something. And that to me, again, is very valuable instead of just being like totally out of control. And this thing is just happening to me.
Mhm.
Like I'm doing something about it is very valuable
Love
to
it.
me. And that sort of like positive mindset.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just time wise, I'm gonna move on to the heavily quotations rapid fire questions, which we could either
Uh,
some of these could take an entire hour.
yeah.
What are your best words of wisdom for people who are newly diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis or similar condition?
Yeah, I'm just gonna parrot what I heard of like kind of being careful of the environment that you're in. I think and I meant to say this earlier and I don't brain fog, don't think I did. I think we have some like pretty solid evidence that your outlook can also affect your physiological condition.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a piece that I keep in mind too, is like my knees might feel better if I try to stay positive in this situation. So
Mhm.
I think that honestly is like my biggest piece of advice is like life isn't over. It's different. Like I will not pretend that things don't look very different for me than they did
Yeah.
5 years ago. But like it is not the end of the world. It is a major shift in the world.
Oh, I mean, 100%. And when you talked about your outlook affecting your condition, I really
Mm,
recommend Dr. Afton Hassett's just psychologist book, Chronic Pain Reset. She is a chronic pain researcher on both fibromyalgia and inflammatory arthritis. And this is 30 days of activities, practices, and skills to help you thrive. So it's structured really beautifully. In the first part, she talks about the science behind pain, chronic pain, how the biopsychosocial framework works, how your thoughts do impact your body and your body in fact impacts your thoughts and stuff. And then she gives you really specific, like I'm talking 2 page each, specific, manageable, doable things to improve like your
mm,
quality of life. And like one is like day 11, it's like it's set up as like 30 days. Day 11, pleasant activity scheduling. Oh, sorry, that's day 8.
mm,
Domains, positive emotions, physical activity, meaning and purpose, social connections. And then we have day 10, take a nature break. Day 11, show yourself compassion. And like it's really, really well thought out. And I'm going to start integrating more of that into the Room to Thrive and the alumni
Love
programs too, because
it.
yeah, it's wonderful. So anyway, thank you for
That's
recommending
awesome.
those. Yeah, that um, being careful at the social environment like that you put yourself in is really big. I honestly say often, even though I'm the biggest proponent of social media for patient connections, I'm very glad that in 2003, when I was diagnosed, there wasn't anything like a Facebook group. There was Facebook, I think, by 2004, but there was no like groups where I could have maybe been led down some really ultimately like
Mhm.
unhelpful rabbit holes. So, um,
Yeah, curate your social media.
curate. Nitika Chopra was the first one who mentioned that. She's a psoriatic arthritis patient advocate, and she leads Chronic Con, a really awesome support program too. So yeah, I love the idea of curating it. You know, some days you want to curate it so you just have pictures of cute little penguins falling down
Right?
like kittens, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
then people with arthritis who are thriving. Yeah. Do you have a favorite quote or inspirational saying for tough days?
Yeah, it's from Taylor Swift.
I
I
was,
mean, it's gotta
it
be.
goes without saying.
I was I was thinking about this and I even asked my husband, like, do I have a phrase? And he was like, I don't think so. And then I was like, wait a second, I totally do. So I have two. And one of them I'm wearing. My very good friend sent me a birthday present, and it is my favorite Taylor Swift line ever. It's actually the top of my fundraising page for the California Coast Classic, to live for the hope of it all.
Oh my
That is, and I didn't even think about it until right now. That's like totally the topic of like staying positive. But
That's gonna be like episode title right there. Episode title
it's
contender. I love it.
just like my favorite line she's ever written. It is this outlook of like, you don't even, I mean, in the context of the song, right? It's like, you, you know, it's about a boy, but like, you don't even have the boy, you have the hope of something. And,
Yeah.
it, I find I can apply that to everything and it just works. And like in the chronic illness world, like it just applies to everything. So
I
that's one.
Yep. Yeah. Well, can I just say the
Yeah.
line before it? I was just double checking, fact checking. It was like wanting was enough. For me, it was
Yeah.
enough to live for the hope of all. I think this idea of enough is something that I often think
Mm,
about, and it goes along with the song Peace, which I also love. Like, is it?
yeah.
It's like it was enough to live for the hope of it all. I think is
Mhm.
beautiful. So okay, then.
I have a second quote, but really quick, because I think it relates to positivity. I use a word very often that my husband and I used to have a little debate over, because we defined it differently. But
Mm,
I frequently talk about being content.
mm,
Content is my ultimate, like being content with my life and what's around it. And
yeah.
we have very different life philosophies. He's kind of like never content. Like, what's the next thing? Where we go? Like, and that's fine. That works for him. But I talk a lot about being content, and I feel like that kind of goes with enough. Like,
Mm,
this is a good place for me, and it might not be what I ultimately dream for, and like and hope for. But content is a very nice place to sort of find that peace and that calm. So
I
I think it
love
kind of
that.
relates to what we've been talking
A
about.
hundred percent. And what's the
So
second one?
the other line is, and there's much debate about this song and the meaning, and it's Taylor, so we'll never know. But you're on your own, kid. You can
We've
face
talked about
this.
this. Yep, yep.
Oh yeah, because the arthritis day posts, I think we
Yeah,
used this.
yeah. No, sorry. I'm
Uh,
gonna let you talk. I'm gonna mute myself so I really
no, it's
self-regulate
fine.
here.
The first time I heard that song, I was just like, oh my gosh. And I have always interpreted that song as like very um encouraging and positive. Like, you're on your own, you can face this. You've always been on your own. And I interpreted that as like, I've gotten through, like you survived 100% of your bad days. Like, I have done this. I have gotten through things. And then I talked to like one of my closest Swiftie friends, and she's like, that song is terrible. It's so depressing about like being alone. And so it was really interesting how we interpret it differently. But I have always thought that like that's so encouraging and so positive, and that phrase specifically, you're on your own, kid, you can face this, is very relevant to, again, life, but specifically like chronic illness. It's like,
It
go back to the
circles,
infusion thing.
yeah, it circles back. Yeah, to what we're talking about. No one will ever
Mhm.
completely understand, but you can face it regardless of that.
Mhm.
So I love that. I love that. Do you have a favorite arthritis gadget or tool in your toolbox, physical or metaphorical?
I have a couple. So first of all, I don't think you know this, but I bought the can opener,
Oh,
and then I bought the can opener for like everybody I know. The can opener is,
the kitchen
I
mama?
mean, yeah, like
Okay.
not only does it work really well, but like it's just so fun.
It's cute.
The
Yeah.
best. It is. I was like expecting it to be good, whatever, but like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing.
Okay.
And then the other thing is my greatest arthritis hack. I don't have very many, but this is a good one. And it's using reusable ice cubes, the little like plastic things full of water that you
Yes.
freeze. I have a compression knee sleeve thing that I respond very well to cold on my joints. And it has this like reservoir that you're supposed to put ice in, but like it all melts into the solid block and you can't get it out and it's hard to dry and it's just like kind of a nightmare other than the 20 minutes it's on your knee. And I use these reusable ice cubes. I don't even have to take them out. It's just like, I know the bag of peas trick is really good too, but like sometimes the peas aren't the right thing to freeze. So
Yeah.
reusable
Yeah.
ice cubes
I
and can
love
opener.
that. I love that. No, and when you posted that on your Instagram, I was like, oh my gosh, why have I never seen those? Like, I literally think you're the first person to show me
Oh,
those,
they're
unless
the
I learned about
best.
them in OT school and forgot about them, which is very possible.
I
But
never
yes,
hear any, I've never seen that anywhere. I'm sure I didn't come up with it. Like these things have existed for 40 years at
right.
least. I had them when I was a kid, but yeah, I don't see a lot of people talking about that. And it's like, so there's no mess, there's no hassle. It freezes like ice. I love
Amazing.
them.
Amazing. Do you have a favorite book, movie, or show you have watched or read recently?
My favorite movie of all time is Forrest Gump, period. Uh,
Oh,
maybe Apollo 13 is a close second. I really like Tom Hanks. Um, and then there's a theme here. I do want to talk the best show I've ever seen. I would say my favorite show is 30 Rock. I'll say
yeah.
it recently because I just watch it on repeat. The best show I've ever seen, and I never hear anyone talking about it. It's an Apple TV Plus show called For All Mankind.
Oh,
And
I never heard.
it
Yeah.
is like the one, I never say this about anything, but if I could go back and experience something for the first time again, it's
Oh
this
my
show.
God.
So
Okay. Oh,
that's
wow.
like, it's so, so, so good.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna check that out immediately. I am looking forward to this is the week that Severance season 2 is coming out.
Uh,
I'll check
I
it out.
haven't watched it, but it's on my list.
It's does not on paper what I would love. Like my favorite show of all
Yeah.
time is like Parks and Recreation. It's like
Hmm.
which is kind of similar to 30 Rock.
Yes,
But
very.
this is very different. Okay, anyway, it's
I can't
very
watch anything right now
good.
because we're like we've got basketball and football. All we do 24/7 in this house is there's
Okay.
like 12 hours basketball a day. So I need
Or
basketball season to be over and then I can go back to my show.
okay. Yeah, no, you have a plan, you have a strategy, you have a
I
plan.
do,
I love it.
yes.
Okay, last one, which we've kind of circled around the whole time, but what does it mean to you to live a good life and thrive with rheumatic disease?
I mean, I think it's just like live your life. It
Yeah.
is really the basis of it. Like I thought it was over. It's super not. Um, and if I didn't have arthritis, like I would never dream of riding a bicycle from San Francisco to LA. Like all
Yeah.
these things that I thought were gone and over, like the community, like I've met so many people that are just so wonderful. Like getting involved in the like, I haven't done too much yet, but this like advocacy stuff with my like local lawmakers is just like something I would not have done. It is not in my comfort zone. So it
Yeah.
has opened so many doors to so many things that I wouldn't have ever thought of or pursued without a diagnosis. And it's really interesting how like I've said this over and over, like things are going to change. Like my life is so different. And I think again, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I feel like I've heard that a lot. Like
Yeah.
things are different post-diagnosis. But like trying to see the opportunities has just really like, I feel like I don't want to say the toxic positivity thing and like get two silver linings here, but like there have been good things that have
Right.
come out of a really crappy diagnosis.
Yeah,
And
that's not
and I
toxic positivity to recognize. You're choosing to turn towards and to see and the opportunities
mhm,
that it has led you to that you wouldn't have had else, otherwise.
yeah.
So,
And I think just not letting it take over. It may have taken over my life and you know, being involved in all these things, but not the disease. And I think that's my biggest, sort of like takeaway of living a good life with this is like just live your life. And this thing will always be under the surface, but it doesn't mean you can't get on with it.
well, this is me being like a linguistics nerd, but like living your life with arthritis
Hmm.
versus making your whole life about battling it and controlling
Yeah.
it and doing the perfect diet or doing the perfect whatever that's going to eliminate it. That's definitely a different perspective. You're saying
Yeah.
living with it. And
Yeah.
to which I say, mic drop.
Ah,
I brought up my Taylor
yay.
Swift.
Yay.
I just like walk around the house with this.
I love
Because
it.
you had to watch the video on YouTube to see what just happened. No, that's your little teaser. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I mean, we always have a little outline and try to talk about the things that you're most passionate about sharing. And this was just really wove together so beautifully. So thank
Yeah.
you for taking the time. We also talked for 45 minutes before we started recording. Thank you for taking
I could
11.
probably talk for hours, but
Yeah. No, we could. We're talkers. We're talkers. Well, where can people follow you online or find you online?
Um, so I guess I'm most active on Instagram with
Mhm.
arthritic Chrissy, sharing
Mhm.
the C in the middle. Um, I mostly am active there and can find me other places online. I do have, if it's okay to plug my
Yes.
ride.
Oh, please,
Um,
I'm putting a link in the show notes to not only your social medias, but also your fundraising page for
Great.
Bike Ride. Yeah.
Yeah, so this California Coast Classic, I am attempting to be I'm giving myself a stretch goal of raising $7,500. And I'm collecting donations, and those go to the Arthritis Foundation to help fund research, to like facilitate these support groups, etc.
Mhm.
So I have a little like page, and it has more details about my story with rheumatoid arthritis and finding a diagnosis. And if you'd like to ride from San Francisco to LA, I think there are still some slots open. It's the 25th anniversary
Oh my
of the
gosh.
ride, and they cap it, I believe, at 250 riders. So if you're interested in something like this, I think there are still spots left, but I don't think there's very many. So,
Oh my
or
gosh.
you can like
Amazing.
reach out to me with questions about the ride. I'm happy to share my experience volunteering with the Arthritis Foundation if people are interested in getting involved there. I have, nothing but good things to say about Room to Thrive also. So if you have any questions
Oh, yeah.
about Cheryl's program and want to ask somebody who's been through it, I'd be happy to field those questions too.
Oh,
But
amazing. Thank you. Oh, Teddy wants to join.
yeah, we didn't really talk about that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
oh, Teddy.
And then my little puppy again watched the video to see Teddy. He wants to join. He can tell when I'm like wrapping up. So he's like, it's time for me to come in your lap.
That's funny.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much. Seriously. I'm so glad that our paths have crossed, and I will be supporting your bike ride for
Yes.
the Arthritis
Yes.
Foundation, and hopefully everyone will follow up with you online. But thank you again for taking
Yeah.
the time. Talk
Thanks
to
for
you
having
later.
me.
Thanks. Bye.